When producing a production of Macbeth, one has to quickly decide how to handle the ambiguity of fate versus free will within the play. One good signifier of how a director has handled this is through the witches of Macbeth, particularly through what and at what times get special effects. While in Shakespeare's time, drums would have been beat for thunder and bladders of blood would be used for gory ends. With the invention of film and special effects for this medium, this has obviously gotten a lot better. Although special effects kept advancing, it seemed to me that the film versions were relying less on special effects, which moved the focus from magical witchiness to a more psychology-based reading of Macbeth and whether or not he had free will. So I'll just give a little quick introduction to some of the films I'll be discussing. First up is Orson Welles' 1948 version of Macbeth, and I'll show a quick clip from that here.
Toil and trouble, fire burn, and cauldron bubble.
Pour in cow's blood that hath eaten her 9 farrow.
Grease,
That's sweating from the murderer's gibbet, thrown to the flame.
finger,
A birth strangled babe.
ditch delivered by a drap. Make the cruel, thick
And suave
like a hell broth, boil and bubble.
for a charm of powerful trouble.
When shall we three meet again? In thunder, lightning, or in rain? When the hurly-burly's done. When the battle's lost and won. That will be at the set of sun.
There to meet with
Macbeth.
As you can see, this version of Macbeth relied heavily on a very classic way of depicting the witches. They come in with smoke and thunder and weird bubbling goo stuff. Around this time, there was a lot more gimmicks in the film so that audiences would pay attention. Basically, at this point, they just kind of wanted the spectacle, so they used a lot more of the witchiness to get that in there. In the second film, Throne of Blood, which is 1957, although it's set in a completely different context, you see a lot of the same signifiers of magic. There's still fog and lightning and thunder. In this film, though, it also shows the idea that the witch represents fate by having its spinning thread. In many Asian countries and other civilizations, there are connections between thread and fate, such as the story of the red string of fate. This goes along with the classic special effects to emphasize that Macbeth isn't really in control of his own destiny, but that the witches are. For me, Polanski's version of Macbeth is a turning point. It seems to go back and forth whether the witches are pulling the strings or if they're magic, but Macbeth is making the choices or what. After doing some reading, it turns out that Polanski had originally intended the dagger scene, which is, for me, another indicator of how magical a production's going to be. He wanted that dagger to be invisible. He thought audiences might not get it, and so decided to go with, having a very obvious CGI dagger. He had also intended for the witches to seem less, supernatural, but more Wiccan. I think this might have to do with the death of his wife, Sharon Tate. At the scene of her death, the word pig was written in her own blood at the request of Charles Manson to leave something witchy, which, considering that it was only about 2 years after her murder, Macbeth started filming, that seems like it would be very important. Rupert Gould's version of Macbeth was the most modern the most modern setting of Macbeth that we have seen yet. The three Witches are 3 trauma nurses, and they seem to honestly cause more trauma than good. This film's magic is very focused, and it has to do with kind of magical medical miracles. There isn't like a bubbling potion or anything, but there's like a needle with poison, and they kill someone with it. Although the witches do bring people back to life to give the prophecy, it's implied that there's some kind of defibrillator. Although magical, it doesn't seem like they have any direct influence over Macbeth, and there's a lack of the classic special effects like fog and smoke and things like that. The last Macbeth I'll talk about is the 2015 Macbeth by Justin Kurzel. Other than the gore and mist, there isn't really special effects in this one. One key moment that solidified the change between fate to free will for me was when Macbeth took the cup from the witches to receive the rest of the prophecy.
Be lion-mettled, proud, and taking no care who chafes, who frets, or where conspirers are.
Macbeth shall never vanquished be,
until great Burnham Wood, to hide on Sinane Hill, shall come against him.
Unlike in other films, he wasn't offered it, but he kind of just grabbed it anyways. The lack of special effects essentially emphasized that the choices that Macbeth made were his own and not due to magical interruption.